This presentation is the State of the Schools Address. This is something that I developed with the superintendent that I worked with about 4 or 5 years ago, and when I was in Madison. Really what the sort of intent of the presentation was to really shine a light on the facts about the district, what people may or may not know about certain things, and really just try to lay bare all of the things that are true about where we are, where our students are, and where we need to be going. When I came into the district, one of the surprising things that I heard immediately was there was very little understanding, for example, of the size of the Hispanic community in the schools, right? We had, I think, 2 sections of ESL at the middle school. We had classes of 34. And within probably 2 months or so, we had advertised for an ESL position, and then we had brought in an ESL teacher, which allowed Ms. Franklin to be full-time at the middle school, right? These are the kinds of things that a presentation like this can show, but it also just gives a general overview of a really broad set of metrics and different information. I'm going to warn you, this is extraordinarily long, and I'm not being facetious. It really is extremely long. There are 73 slides. I'm not going to go in detail through all 73 of them, but I will spend a little bit of time, on sort of broad strokes. The presentation is available online. So I see this sort of scared look on some of your faces. If you want to spend 10 minutes here and then look at the presentation and ask me questions about it later, that's perfectly okay. I get it. But I will try to do this at a pace that makes some sense so that everybody who's here really can get a meaningful kind of understanding of this. So the first thing to do is just thank those who have been involved in this. In our district, there are a couple of folks who have in their signature line this quote from Hamish Brewer, and it says something like, school is not school without students, right? So first and foremost, our students who really are kind of like, this is the entire reason that any of us are here. Thank you to them. Our faculty and staff, many of you who have been here for many years in the district, for all of the work that you do, our administrative team, the families that get their kids up every morning and get them to school and help them with their homework and help them prepare for exams and those sorts of things. The Board of Ed for your tireless volunteerism. We spend a lot of time talking with the board, and these folks are up here just as volunteers, no compensation, just here to help the community. And then we have a wide range of community partners, the PTO, the Denellen Public Library, Ms. Moore, who's here, who comes to every board meeting, just incredibly passionate and diligent and just devoted to the district. We thank you for that. Yeah, we can give her a round of applause. Yeah. She hates being in the limelight, and yet she does such amazing things that she's always in the limelight. So thank you. Ms. Lopez Velez, Terry Albertson, who many of you know is super involved in programming, as well as being the Borough Council President now. The other borough leadership folks from the Rotary, American Legion, and others who provide support. So this really is a team effort. So mission statement is here. I'm not going to read through it. I just sort of took it apart in a way, right? The mission statement talks about essential skills, right, which is the academic piece, and a safe, caring, and stimulating learning environment, right, which is really what I call goal 2. So we got the goal 1 and the goal 2 kind of built into the mission statement. Here are our district goals, right? These are widely available. These are, as part of the budget hearing, part of everything that we do. We center the district goals. Goal 1, academic success and data use. Goal 2, student wellness and school climate. Goal 3, construction progress and fiscal health. So if you want to leave after this slide, here's the takeaway, right? Here are some key takeaways. Multi-tiered systems of support, right? This is something that we've been talking about since I arrived in the district. We have an incredibly diverse district, right? One of the most diverse districts in Middlesex County, certainly across the state. What that means is that we have to differentiate the things that we do. The academic supports, the SEL supports. We have to build structures and processes that can help different types of students. We are not homogeneous by any means. We're about 20% multilingual learners, right? And we have to make sure that we are helping and supporting differentiated populations. Many of you know that a lot of our additions this year coming up are related to special education and counseling and ESL, and that's because we need more supports in those areas, right? Number two, surveys and demographics. We gave surveys out to all of our stakeholders, and what we found was that generally the lived experience of Denellen students and families is very positive, which I think really it reflects the things that you all feel as you walk through the hallways. Kids are really nice, right? Kids are thoughtful for the most part. They say hello in the hallway. They want to do well by you. Parents are supportive. They are grateful for the work that teachers do. And that really came through in the demographic surveys. So we have a really strong foundation to work from. Number three, our academic outputs are very similar to those with a similar demographic profile, right? So when you look at who are our students in Denellen, you know, the districts that look like us in terms of who we have here, it's very similar in terms of our outputs. Unfortunately, when you take those outputs and you put them into ranking systems or rating systems or real estate systems, it doesn't translate to something positive. So we have to really try to do our best to outperform those groups in our cohort. So here's a district overview, right? This is extremely small because of the way that Google Slides did this, but we have a large Hispanic population, a moderately sized white population, and then we have another sort of breakdown of other racial and ethnic groups. Economics, we are just about 50% economically disadvantaged. That means that families, and this is again self-reported, which is always an underreporting, it means that half of the students that are in Denellen Public Schools come from families that whose income is below a certain threshold, right? So that means that there's all sorts of different issues that those kids come to school with as opposed to their peers. Special education, we're about 14.5%, which is pretty average for a district of our size. Very split male and female. And home language, we have most of our students speak English, but there is a significant portion of students who speak Spanish as their home language. We have 1,370 students, and the district factor group, this is a really important factor, a metric. This is a statewide metric that examines the percentage of economic disadvantaged students in your district. So we'll talk about, I'll show you some slides later on, but when you think about the wealthiest place you know, right? Montgomery, Chatham, Milburn, those places are called J districts, right? They're all the way on one side of the spectrum, right? The poorest places that you know, right? Newark, Camden, Jersey City, those would be A districts, right? And then there's a spectrum of wealth that goes from A to J, where J is wealthier. So we're DE here in Denellen. This is the fourth least affluent of the 8 categories. So here's our enrollment, and as you know, enrollment has been increasing, right? There's a demographic breakdown on the right. There's a key also. Again, I'm not going to try to go through all of this in you know, super fine detail. If you notice the percentage of economic disadvantage, which is the third row in the group, you can see what happens in 2021, 21-22, and then 22-23. There's a reason for this, and this is actually very similar to the way that many districts have reported. If you remember, for the last 2 years, students could have free lunch and breakfast without reporting their income, right? And so families didn't recognize that there are still other benefits to reporting their income, and so they just didn't report because their kids were being, you know, fed meals, which is understandable. This year, we did a really big push to try to get families to report. We know that if 51% of our families are reporting, it's probably 65% of our families in the community that are actually economically disadvantaged. But because it's self-reporting, we're just never going to get to that amount. If you look at our Hispanic population at Faber here, we've seen an increase of about 5% over the last couple of years, and certainly those of you at Faber recognize that to be true. Our overall enrollment at Lincoln Middle School is very similar, and you can see the similar trends: increase in economic disadvantage, increase in the Hispanic population, and at Denellen High School as well. And what you notice about all of these graphs is that we're increasing, right? And if you read through or looked at the enrollment report, the demographic report, you saw some pretty interesting trends, which I'll talk about as well. So we did a demographic study because we were trying to figure out really what we should be looking at for 5 years from now. And there were 2 sets of projections done by the demographer, and they used something called the cohort replacement model. So you look at the current year kindergarten students, and you look at the number of births 6 years 6 years later, and you see about what the comparison is. And what we recognize, what the demographic study showed us, that we have a significant increase in students anticipated. And what that means is because we don't have more space anticipated over the next 5 years, we have what are called unhoused students, meaning we have too many students by the facility standards of the Department of Ed to actually fit them into our building. So currently, Faber is showing a shortage of seating of 58 students, which is actually kind of weird because if you're in Faber, you know that it's not brimming with students, right? We have some rooms that are free during the day and all sorts of things. LMS is slightly over capacity, which is again, kind of nuts because if you're in LMS, you know that it feels very over capacity, right? And the high school actually has additional seating, which again, doesn't feel quite right. But based on the amount of square footage that there is in the building, this is what's calculated. By 28-29, Faber is looking at seeing a shortage of space that's twice as much as it is right now. And the high school is going to have a significant amount of unhoused students. So these are the projections. 4-year and 5-year projection are just how many years they took for the average. And so there's a slight variation, but what you can see is that by 28-29, we're looking at either 1473 or 1440, somewhere in that range. Call it 1450. That's 100 more students or 80 more students than we have right now. It also doesn't take into account preschool because with our preschool education aid, we're looking at another 100 preschool students, right? So this is a really significant issue for us, and we've talked about this in the budget presentation, but it's important here. Chronic absenteeism is a really big issue plaguing state districts all across the country. This is our information compared to the state. We're actually doing a little bit better than the state, which is nice. You can see by population where we have a little bit more or a little bit less chronic absenteeism, but we're pretty similar to the state. And what's interesting about chronic absenteeism is that preschool students actually count. And if you have had young kids or if you have young kids, you know that preschool students are sick all the time. And they stay home a lot because there's sort of a different tolerance for bringing them to school. So very high levels of absenteeism for preschool students, a little bit high at kindergarten, and then the rest of the grades, you can see sort of the district trends against the state. We're doing a little bit better than the state, but there's always room for improvement. Recent aid and grant awards. So preschool expansion aid this current school year provided us with just under $500,000 in additional aid. This is not a grant. We don't have to apply for this every year. This is now state aid. So every year from now on, as long as the state has money, we will receive funding without having to apply for additional preschool aid. Next school year, our aid increases to $1.5 million. And it will only get higher as we create additional seats either in the district, if we can add space, or in private providers. So we're looking at potentially having $3 million or so in additional state aid. This is only usable in preschool, but it covers the preschool teacher salaries, preschool paraprofessionals. It covers all of the materials, the preschool instructional coach, the social worker that's there as part of that program. So it's a monumental and amazing objective, which is basically universal preschool for all 3- and 4-year-olds in Denellen. So if we can achieve that, that would be remarkable. We've also been very active in trying to get funding through competitive grants. And so this is a list of the competitive grants and the funding that we've received just in the last 12 months. And the first 2 bullets were actually just this month. So in the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks or so, we heard about both of those grants, which is wonderful. Professional Development Partnership Awards, we've also been interested in professional learning partnerships. So these are 3 of the partnerships that we've applied for and been welcomed to, all of which have really paid off for the folks that have participated. So this is our sort of effort to try to create that innovation, work with partners, get additional funding, take some of the burden off of taxpayers, et cetera. All right, academics and assessment. So this is obviously a big part of what we do, right? We look at outputs. When you think about, if you're a parent, when you were thinking about buying a house, you probably looked at school district rankings, or you looked at, as part of a website for a house, you said, oh, that school is a 3 out of 10. I never want to send my kid to a place like that, right? It's totally it's understandable that folks view these systems that way. that ranking, right, which we'll talk more about later on in this presentation, is based largely on academics and assessment, as well as some other factors. So what we have here is basically New Jersey School Report Card, which is the school performance report, puts this out each year. There's a data lag, so we just saw the 22-23 data, and our staff, all of you've been working with data, getting more familiar with data, having that comfort of what to do with the data, and that's obviously part of our mission moving forward. So I'm going to talk about the assessments that are listed there. 2 state tests, the student learning assessment, the GPA, which is a graduation proficiency assessment, iReady, AP, SAT, and then some other information as well. So the NJSLA is the annual standardized test. This is required by the federal government. It's now also a part of the state government. So we have to test students in grades 3 through 11, and we test them in ELA, math, and science is relatively new, and it's all based on the standards. Our outcomes from spring 2023 are basically in line with districts that look like us. So when you think about districts that have the same number of economic disadvantaged kids percentage-wise, our results are similar, and actually we sort of do better in some of those cases. But we also know that there's more work for us to do. Those of you that have been involved in standards alignment and curriculum rewrites and things like that know that we still have a lot of room to improve, which bodes really well for us moving forward. So our proficiency rates for federal accountability, and this is in the report card, we had 37.1% of students proficient overall in ELA, and we had 25.8% of students proficient overall for math. So, again, this is a starting point, right? We are looking at ways to support staff in their understanding of this and, rebuild the curriculum and the use of data so that we can take these numbers and really improve them significantly. The information below is participation rate, which is very high, which is great. And then the annual target, and then whether we met or did not meet the target. So that's here. By cohort level, right, this is if you take 3rd grade students from last year or 2 years ago, and then they become 4th grade students the next year, how do those kids compare against each other, right? So that compares this. So the current 3rd grade, the 3rd grade from 2 years ago, right, current 5th graders, they took the 4th grade assessment last year, and you can see that they did a little bit better when they moved from 3rd to 4th grade. And you can see that these results there's some that are better, some that are worse. The big jump down from 7th to 8th grade, if you understand kind of the curriculum progression here for math, in 7th grade, some students are skimmed off the top to take Algebra 1, and then you have the remainder of students who take 8th grade math. And so that's a very common drop where you have, every kid in 7th grade, but then they split from Algebra 1 and Math 8. And so what we want to do is we'll look at this year's assessment results and see if we are able to make progress on these cohorts as they move through the years. In ELA, it's pretty flat, except you can see again from 3rd grade to 4th grade, there's a big jump. And often districts see this because 3rd grade is the first year that kids are tested, right? So if they're not familiar with the test, they don't know what it looks like. They've never taken it. They've never sat for an assessment that long. It seems stressful. Their teachers are stressed out. Their parents are stressed about it. They get that stress, right? So our goal with iReady and some of the other things is to get them a little bit more comfortable in 1st and 2nd grade with that type of assessment so that by 3rd grade they're ready and their results can really reflect their learning. This is the growth part of things. So we did have pretty decent growth, right? 50% is median growth. 50 percentile. So you can see that district-wide ELA growth was 41. So we didn't quite hit statewide median, but in math we did. So we're seeing a little bit of progress there. So again, some hopes for an improved future. And you can see the subgroup information here, which I won't belabor. All right, these are the charts that I think are probably the most important when we think about assessment. Now, it's blurry. So it's hard to kind of see what this is. But if you look at the presentation on your phone or on your computer, it's very clear, and I'll sort of walk you through this. On the x-axis on the bottom, right, so from left to right, it is the percentage of students in the district that are economically disadvantaged. So to the left of the graph, there are 0 students who are economically disadvantaged, which means it's a wealthy district. And to the right of the graph, it is the districts that have a very, very high percentage of economically disadvantaged students. Now, anybody who knows anything about data analysis can look at this graph and make a very obvious conclusion, which is that performance on standardized testing is linked almost entirely to demographics, right? It couldn't be more obvious in a graph like this, and actually all of the graphs that I'll show you, that is true. So the top left graph, top left data point is Bernards. And then it's Montgomery, and then it's Metuchen, and then it's Monroe, South Brunswick, Bridgewater, Raritan, et cetera, okay? And then to the right, it's New Brunswick, Perth Amboy, Plainfield, Bound Brook, North Plainfield, et cetera. When you think about Dunellen, you might not know that Dunellen has about the same amount of economically disadvantaged students as North Brunswick, or as South Amboy, or as South River, or Manville, or Union, right? And these are all of the districts in Middlesex County and most in Union and Somerset. K-12 districts only, right? So the point here is to center the idea. It's not that we're doing badly. It's that for the students that we have, we're doing exactly as we would expect to be doing, right? And when you look at a graph like this, it's very clear that places that are, you know, much wealthier generally are going to do much better on the standardized assessments. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't keep trying. It doesn't mean that we don't put systems in. But it is to say that we're with our cohort at this point. And this is ELA for the NJSLA. Here's math. I mean, first of all, the ELA scale goes up to 90%. So you can see how much better kids generally do in ELA as compared to math. But look at how steep that curve is for math, right? Bernards, Montgomery, Metuchen, Monroe, again, these are the wealthiest districts in the areas. And then we have Dunellen, and then we have to the right of us. And in fact, this is perfect. What that sort of axis there where Dunellen is to just show you, you know, to the right we have lower performing, to the left we have higher performing, right? So this is very much sort of expected based on demographics. Our science passing rates have been very mixed. And you know, again, this is very new testing. We have a lot of work to do still with all of our subject areas. Science is certainly included in that. Science teachers have been very actively engaged in changing instruction to become more phenomenon-based. And you know, as we learn through the standards, we'll see an increase as well. But here's our results and the state results for the last 2 years. And that's the NJSLA, okay? The NJGPA is a graduation assessment. This is 11th grade. This is 11th grade students. This is the graduation readiness assessment. And basically the results are you are graduation ready or you're not graduation ready. So in DHS from spring 2023, so last year, over 80% of students demonstrated graduation readiness in ELA, which is wonderful. Only about 60% demonstrated readiness in math. So again, we performed much better in ELA against math. But when we look at the results across the county, right, this is the math results. Now look at how high Dunellen is, right? So in the 11th grade results for last year, Dunellen students actually outperformed students in Woodbridge and Middlesex and the State and Sayreville and Piscataway, South Plainfield, Old Bridge, right? So students did very well in math in 11th grade last year, which is wonderful. And you can see sort of the trend line again. In ELA, all students across this cohort and across the state did significantly better in ELA than math. So when we look at our scores, we shouldn't lament that our kids did better in ELA than math. It's just what happened across the state. And so again, Dunellen is in good company in terms of how it did in terms of the 11th grade scores. All right, iReady is a different type of assessment. This is a nationally normed assessment. This is a diagnostic. And basically it determines sort of tiered readiness. So are students on grade level? Are they above grade level? Or are they below grade level? And so there are these green, yellow, and red sort of metrics that are shown in here. Results from 23-24 basically showed that students did better between the first and the second assessment, but that we all need to do a lot better work in terms of the administrative team to get this sort of program run all the way through. So we have to make sure that students understand the assessment and its purpose, that staff members understand the assessment and its purpose. And we don't have results from spring 2024, but this is what we'll be looking at. So with iReady, this is the first year that we've given it. So again, this is totally brand new to kids. And what you can see, I circled 2 points of interest, right? From the second line of results, it says fall. It's actually weird the way that it does it. It's diagnostic 2 and then fall. You can see that the number of students that were 1 or 2 grade levels below where they were supposed to be dropped from 35% to about 20%, right? So very, very significant improvement. At middle school, you can see that that trend didn't quite work the same way on the bottom level, but on the top level, students went from 25% to 31% of at grade level or above grade level. So a significant little jump there out of the students that were tested. This is the grade level piece, and really the 4th and 5th grade teachers must have really gotten something good going with their kids, because those students especially showed a lot of progress from the fall to the second diagnostic. And then at the middle school, the 7th grade teachers got good results out of the students. They were able to demonstrate more proficiency. Same thing in math, very similar, from about 35% to about 20% of 1 or 2 grade levels below the grade level average. And again, 15 to about 17%, so slight increase for the middle school kids. And then by grade level, 1st grade students did much better on the second diagnostic than they did at the first beginning of the year. And then 4th and 5th grade, again, those students showed really significant growth there, which is wonderful. And then 7th grade again in terms of math. So I'll take a break for a minute. Thank you for staying this long. Have a good night. Good to see you. All right, advanced placement testing. This is a statewide international assessment of readiness based on AP curriculum, advanced placement curriculum. This is internationally benchmarked. Scores range from 1 to 5. High school has 9 courses, which is a very good number for a school of 400 kids. We have extremely high participation rate as compared to the state, which is wonderful. The number of AP students increased a lot last year and stayed high again this year. And we tend to have kids who are enrolled take the assessments, which is great. Our 5-year score average is very mixed. So that means more work needs to be done generally. But this is the participation in spring 2023, right? So you can see the number of kids that took each of the courses that we offer, right? We're working on pathways to try to get more kids to take these courses because we know that they're good college preparation level courses. And then this is the participation against the state by demographics. And so you can see the blue is the district. So when you look at the percentage of students who are Hispanic or the percentage of students who are Black or African American as compared to the state average, it's very high, which is great, right? That means that we're reaching a very broad group of students when we're trying to allow people and the open enrollment into AP courses. There's good support for those kids taking those classes. So the percentage of students who score a 3 or above, which is considered passing, you can see that average, it's sort of up and down over the course of the years. These are different students, so it's hard to compare from one year to the next because it's just different groups of students taking these assessments. And then you can see the information down below. We did have even more AP students than last year. This year we had 80, up from 77, and then up from 50s and 60s prior to that. So we're looking forward to their exam scores. Those will come out at the beginning of July. So good work here on the AP overall. SAT is another important feature of most of these systems of how schools get ranked and rated. And here's our averages. This year was the first year where we actually tested all 9th and 10th grade students with the PSAT, and that's going to be just something that will always have in place. So next year, our 9th and 10th grade students will all take the PSAT again. And again, most of this is just about getting kids acclimated to taking some assessment. I don't know if you remember taking the SAT, but the first time you took it, it was like, what is this, right? But as you take it more and more, you understand how the test operates, you become familiar with it, and then you can perform better. You can actually show the test, to demonstrate sort of what you understand. So we have our scores here as compared to the state. We are below the state in our averages in reading and in math. And the percentage of students who met the benchmark, sort of vary based on the content area. We have a lot of work to do in math generally, And so we can see that reflected in many of these assessments sort of over and over again. And again, that's just systematizing things. We've got great staff members. We've got really eager folks who want to learn and who are interested. We just have to put in that program and give the right professional development and support for it. So here's SAT Math. And by that same metric, you can see the very, very strong trend line of wealth to scores. And then here's SAT Reading and Writing, and it's very much the same. So, these are all the same schools that are being compared in all of these types of graphs. So you can really get a good sense of kind of where Dunellen lines up. All right, graduation rates. We did have a nice increase in graduation rate this past year, and we're hoping to keep that high this year moving forward. So we're really, the goal is to be above 90%. As you know, because these cohorts are so small, if you have 2 students that don't graduate in a class of 100 or whatever it is, right, the percentages are very small, right? So districts that have a lot of students can have sort of different leverage with that. Our graduation rates have been relatively high as compared to the state. They're right about at the state average, and obviously we can continue to work on keeping kids in the district. These are the college acceptances that we've been made aware of at this point. So we have a lot of students going to New Jersey schools, which is exactly what we would expect. And really, I think every New Jersey school that I could think of was on this list. Some of the county schools, Middlesex College, and then TCNJ, as Sophia mentioned, a lot of students going to Rutgers, and then Drew, FDU, et cetera. And then really a very broad range of schools beyond New Jersey. So as far west as California or Colorado School of Mines, as far south as University of Alabama, UNLV, and then schools like Mount Holyoke, which are smaller liberal arts colleges that are very selective. Many of the SUNY schools, Penn State, Williams College, again, extremely selective liberal arts school. So we have a really broad range of outcomes for students, which is really nice. All right. This is big part number 3. 2024 climate surveys, okay? Just brief overview. This was a survey that was sent in March to families, staff members, and students. There were aligned questions based on certain content areas so that we could compare perceptions. How do students feel about this? How do staff members feel about this? And how do families feel about this, right? And we worked on these questions with Urban Assembly, and they did some of the data analysis, which we'll talk about. We had good responses. We had 1,022 students respond, which was great. We had 104 staff members respond, which is 60% or so of our staff, and we had 156 families respond, which is pretty average for family member responses for a survey like this. We also disaggregated all the student response data so that we could see how kids who are white or kids who are black or kids who are Hispanic, how they responded to the questions to see if there was any difference in those perceptions. So the climate survey family responses and the student responses, the next 2 slides, are from a 0 to 1 scale. The third slide's from a 1 to 3 scale, which is just confusing, I understand, but I couldn't figure out how to do the other one the other way. So we have our participation here. Basically, higher is better. And this is color-coded, so the darker is better. And you can see, basically, family responses were generally positive across the board. They were probably highest across the board at Dunellen High School based on the family responses. And the weighted average across the board was very good. Families of Lincoln Middle School parents, responded positively, just not as positively as the Faber parents or the high school parents, right? And this is just information for us to learn about more. Now, these are components, right? So these are each one of these categories is actually like 8 questions, right? And we have the question average, but presenting individual question responses is just, that's too much. So the category responses, I think, are telling enough, they're helpful enough to give a sense. And then the admin team and actually the climate teams have reviewed the individual data to look at some of the responses about what families are thinking. The student responses are similar, right? The Faber students did not answer questions about their peers. The middle school and high school kids did. you can see that in this survey, the Faber students tended to respond most positively about their experience in school, which is very much what you would expect from elementary kids. Middle school students responded well to certain things and okay to other things, and similar with the high school, right? So there's definitely perceptual things that we need to kind of understand. And again, this doesn't mean that there are problems in one way or another. This is about perception. And so if someone perceives that there's something, right, then that's something that we have to counter with facts and information. It doesn't mean that the thing exists. So this is the student responses. And then here's the demographic breakdown. And again, this is a different scale. This is from 1 to 3. Higher is better. So you can see that when kids are talking about school, when they're talking about safety, there are generally positive results across the board. And if you look across the categories, and I put the number of students there, it's still a small number, but you can see the results. There's not a lot of variation between the demographic groups, which means that in general, right, when our staff interact with students, students are feeling across the board, supported in the same type of way, which is great, right? Some districts have huge differentiation between students of maybe white and Asian students and Black and Hispanic students, right? We don't have that in Dunellen, which is, again, it's wonderful, because again, it's just about the foundation that we have to build on. So my takeaways from this, really, the safety piece was overwhelmingly just the number one rated, piece of the experience. All stakeholder groups indicated safety was something that they believed was definitely something that the district was doing well. There was a lot of positivity about the way that students and staff members talked about respect and feeling welcomed in the communities, families rather. And then students in different demographic groups seem to be experiencing the district in generally similar ways. Areas for growth, we do have perceptual gaps. So there are some questions and some sub-questions where maybe parents responded differently than staff members, differently than students. So we have to address those to see where the perceptual issue is. Students and parents indicated a desire to be more involved in the educational process of the schools, which is a good thing, I think. It means that folks are invested, it means they're interested, it means they want to learn more, they want to participate. And then student comments indicated a desire for instruction and class assignments to be more engaging and relevant, which I would imagine if you asked students in most places, they would say they wanted their instruction and class assignments to be more engaging and relevant. But again, if it's something that students are feeling, then it's something we need to be mindful of. So how are we instructing? Are there things that we can be doing differently? What are some of the reasons that students might feel that way? So those are the surveys. All right, lastly, I'm going to just blow through the rankings and rating system stuff. There's a ton of information here. I've already given you a ton of information. There's rating systems, which are the DOE and the great schools listed here, and there's ranking systems, which are those three listed there. There's an article that was published in School Leader magazine that I authored about this topic. This was the cover article of the spring 2024 issue. It's linked there. There's a ton of information on it, not related to Dunellen, but just generally. So you can talk, if you're interested in learning more, that's there for your reference as well. And basically, I want to talk about this slide and then just show you some things without talking too much detail, right? These systems are developed by third-party groups to serve their own interests, right? Which often means making a profit or selling a service, right? So there's some incentive that they have, which is different than the incentive that we have as school leaders or as educators or school administrators. Every single one of these systems is different, which means that it's really hard to compare one to the other. And there's very little consistency between one and the next. So it's hard to know, if you were someone who wanted to chase metrics, it's hard to know which metrics to chase, right? Because they're all different in some way. Everything is about creating winners and losers. Everything is about rank order or scoring. And so there will always be winners and losers, right? And so, that's just built into the system. We know that this influences people who buy homes. We know that it influences businesses when they think about going into communities. So these are real important factors. And then many of the data pieces that are used are subject to a time lag, which could be as much as 4 years. Some places care about these a lot, right? I was in Madison for 5 years, and they were obsessed with the ratings. And they said, why are you You know, we were 31 in this last year and now we're 33. How could we have dropped so far? Like, what a shame, right? What are you doing? It's educational malpractice. And we're like, well, I mean, you know, the SAT score average dropped 2 points, you know, and in wherever, Scotch Plains Fenwood, it raised 2 points, right? So, but people care about this in real ways, right? In some places. So it's important to understand what these are about just because people look at them. So we do a ton of reporting. If you ever see Dave Petzinger and he's just like huddled in front of his computer staring at stuff, it's probably because he's doing an NJ Smart report. We have 5 NJ Smart reports. We have civil rights data collection, which is federal, the ASSA. We have all these other reports, and there's a lot of public information that basically culls all of this together and makes it available. So if you're, you know, doing a doctoral thesis or a master's thesis about education, you can find all this information. It's all public. So we report out all of this stuff, and they use these. So demographics, graduation rate, you know, budget information, assessment data, et cetera. They use a lot of it, right, in different ways, which again makes it challenging, but there's a ton that's out there. All right, so NJDOE is a rating scale from 1 to 100. This is high school ratings and elementary ratings are different. There's different categories. Our summative scores for the last 3 years are shown here. And what you can see here is that LMS has dropped precipitously in the summative school scores. And that's reason for concern in some sort of way, right? We've got to understand how we could have dropped this much in such a short time, right? I don't know exactly why it is, which particular metric it might be, but it's of concern. And you can see that the high school and Faber both bounced way back from last year, or from 2 years ago in last year's ratings. And we won't know what the current year ratings are until in January or February or something like that. And by that time, it's really hard to make any decisions about it, but we will investigate this. Greatschools.org, you may have seen, this is another one. They use percentile rank, and so it's a rank order that gets turned into a rating. Right, so here's the stuff that they use. It's all very detailed. And then here are our scores. So often when you go on a real estate site and you look up a house in Dunellen and you're like, well, it's a beautiful house. I'd really love to live there. You know, I wonder what the schools are like. And you're like, oh my God, the high school is a 3 out of 10. It must be terrible. There must be violence. There must be no learning going on, right? And it's crazy because having just seen the climate survey results, you recognize that the experience of people in the school is totally different than what's shown through these metrics, right? And that's the part that is so concerning about these types of things. It's also one of the things that we have to just be aware of because it's just out there. And so, you know, yes, like this is not great. This seems embarrassing, but it is what it is. It's just the facts. It's just what's there. And so there's a lot of things that we have to be aware of that go into this. And if we can move the needle on a lot of the really important things, these will just improve just by the nature of things, right? But again, this is what there is at this point. US News, you all know, here's their system for K-12, and here are the rankings. So you saw, you know, Dunellen High School is a 3 out of 10. Meanwhile, in the US News ranking, DHS earns a national ranking in the top 40% of the country. Totally different, right? If you're a 3 out of 10, that means your school is terrible or whatever. But then you look at this set of metrics, and it's completely different. When you look at the order of schools in Middlesex County, and these are high schools only, right? Look at the high schools that Dunellen is ranked higher than, and by how much. So yeah, J.P. Stevens, Metuchen, South Brunswick, Monroe, right? Those are wealthy districts. Edison, Highland Park, you know, a couple of those other districts have a little bit more wealth. But then if you look at what's below Dunellen, right? Old Bridge, North Brunswick, you know, there are a lot of districts. Again, when you compare the two rating systems or any two with each other, you don't get a lot of consistency, right? So here's the scorecard, and here's the things that they measure. How many students took at least one AP exam? How many passed at least one? Math, reading, science proficiency, and graduation rate. So we know that they care a lot about AP exams, which is good because we do well in APs, right? So again, you know, this is just trying to give you a flavor of the information that's there. Niche is another one very much tied to real estate. Here are our ratings. You know, according to Niche, our teachers are a C+, right? Our clubs and activities are a C-, and our sports are a C-, right? So again, what does this mean? What does it actually mean? It means very little, but it also means that this is something that people are looking at. This is something that people are seeing, and they're saying, "Whoa, that's something about Dunellen." They're making some sort of judgment about it. SchoolDigger.com is very much just tied to NJSLA, and it's just a composite of test scores. So SchoolDigger is actually one that is just very simple. It just looks at test scores. And so it doesn't take into account anything else, for better or for worse. And you can see the 5-year comparison. We have, you know, comparatively, the test scores in Faber Middle School and High School on the NJSLA have gone down. And so since 2018, you can see that overall, as compared to all the districts in the state, you know, our scores are suffering a little bit. The difference between that, you know, for let's say Faber is about 44% down to about 30%, right? So the percentile rank has gone down 14 percentile points, which is significant, right? So this is an area where we know that by improving, you know, on our state assessments, right, we will see an improvement here. Okay, so a lot of information. Here are the 3 key takeaways, I think very much echoed in sort of the way that I've been speaking about this. We're a very diverse district, and that means that we need a diversity of solutions that have to be very structured and mapped out, and well articulated and well supported, both in academic success in terms of PLC work and tiered system of supports, intervention, ESL support, et cetera, special education, and also on the SEL side, so that perceptions that students feel good about coming to school, that they attend school, that we have good programs in place to stop students from dropping out and give them the right kind of support. Again, the surveys and demographics, the lived experience of Dunellen students and families is good, right? And that's something that we should capitalize on. And then lastly, academic outputs as compared to all of that are different. And so we do have to be aware of academic outputs, right? Leveraging the kind of climate that has been able to be built in the schools into academic successes. This is a slide that's taken directly from the budget presentation. So this is all of the staff that we're adding this year. We have goal 1 information here, goal 2 information, goal 3, and some capital projects. If you haven't seen this slide, if you didn't look at the budget presentation earlier, it's there. Really, we're looking at new standards, increasing information, increasing support for special education, instructional coaching, ESL, really trying to support our kids in a wide variety of areas and support all of you as teachers in being able to meet the needs of our students. School climate is security, SEL, our in-house support framework for school-based counseling that's going to take over from Thrive. Goal 3, we have a lot of facilities pieces that we're working on. And then we have a lot of capital projects that we're doing, some room replacements, renovations, and then we're looking to also do some expansion at Faber that might alleviate some of the space. And then our next steps really just close this year strong, right? It has been a hard year, I would say, just in terms of all of the initiatives and ideas and programs, and I recognize that. So we're going to close the year strong. We're going to work to hire excellent new staff members who will join the team and support the district mission. We have curriculum revisions and rewrites in a wide range of content areas, and I'm very thankful to those of you that were doing that work, especially on Friday, with your teams and your PLCs. We're onboarding a new data analytics platform, which only the administrators will be using probably for about the first year, so that we can better understand that really local data. We have our in-district wellness counseling model, which I mentioned, which replaces Thrive. We have our next steps with regard to school climate coaching, which is really urban assembly and sort of their function for next year. And then from my perspective, really aligning administrator goals and PD plans with our key priorities. Because what I've noticed is I have a sense of how things should be working, and I haven't necessarily been able to articulate that as well as I need to my admin team, and then how that gets translated down to staff. And that's something that I need to learn better as a superintendent, in service of all of you. So that's going to be a big thing for next year, and we'll definitely have improvements there. and then basically just prepare for an amazing year next year. So that's it. So thank you.